guys, I'm so excited for this session. Doug Leslie, who's been a youth leader, a former youth leader for almost 20 years, and also a pastor, is going to inspire us with words, parents, as far as what we ought to be doing now and later and why. But first, we're going to start with Deborah Lawrence, who is one of the Parent-Led Academy coaches. I love. She's so knowledgeable. But not only that, she's been a homeschool mom for nearly 20 years with 4 kids, does daycare, was children's ministry director for how many years, Deborah?
12.
12. So my goodness, this woman is a wealth of information, and I can't wait for you to share. So let's go get started, Deborah.
Right now, I know a lot of parents are saying that their greatest stress is figuring out this homeschooling thing with their kids. And I was reading a friend's Facebook post and saw this term, and I loved it, that none of us really are homeschooling right now. We're all crisis schooling. There's a crisis going on in our world, not even just in our home or our town or our country. And it's not homeschooling as usual. So even those of us who have been homeschooling for 20 years, it's not just homeschooling as usual. Our activities are canceled. The way we normally do things, the groups we get together in, all of those are canceled, and we're trying to figure out homeschooling differently. And so whether you were a public school or a private school or a charter school, an online school, homeschool, life's different. And school is having to adjust around that. We're all crisis schooling at some level. I think there are some people who did online school before, or some homeschoolers who were stayed home a lot, who life hasn't changed a whole lot for them. But parents' jobs have changed. Dads are home who weren't home before. Doug and I were talking yesterday, and I said, in our homeschool, one of the hardest things I've noticed is because my husband, who is a public school educator, is home. In our life, that means it's summer. And so we are having the hardest time focusing on school because he's home. So even though he's still working and he's doing all his Zoom meetings, he's here and he takes breaks in the middle of the day and he's around. So we all are like, wait, why do we have to do school? Dad's home. What is this? So, so just know that we're all figuring out this crisis time. So
that's a really good point, because one of the things that like we're facing in our home is I work from my house, much like Deborah does. And I run a full-time job, but it's from my home office because we're decentralized as an organization. But with having kids in the house, that goes out the window, right? The crisis schooling is a really good term. And I'm going to adopt that, because the reality is, just like Deborah's husband's having to do, Scott's having to take breaks during the day, and he goes and sees the kids. It's abnormal. It's abnormal for us as parents, and it's abnormal for the student and for your children as well. And so both sides have to adapt to that reality, which means a lot of flex has to go into place in terms of our daily schedule.
Yeah, we've definitely found that we've had to, like you said, flex, adjust our expectations and our schedule, and have, my other favorite phrase right now is grace upon grace. We have so much grace for each other. And when there's days that are just, I just can't today. Right. Another friend lost a job, but you know what? We're going to go take some meat to our friend who's a single mom with one of my daughter's best friends. We're like, you know what? We have some extra meat. Can we bring you some meat for your freezer? She's like, I would love that. We're like, whatever. We're not doing school today. We're going to go package meat, take it to a friend. And then other days like, okay, school is important. Some normalcy of school, some normalcy of schedule is important, but we're all in crisis. And the formal education just isn't always going to be the number one priority of the day. And grace upon grace, if that's not the number one priority of your day, if it's your family that dad's lost their job or mom's lost their job, the amount of crisis in your home just went up exponentially.
Yeah.
And if what you can manage is choosing a book to read out loud together, or logging in for your school's kind of opening session, and maybe you get through half an hour of some online piece, okay, grace upon grace. The amount of crisis in your home is going to help determine that. And in the midst of it, what's most important is your relationships in your family.
Yeah.
Even my husband, who's a principal at an elementary or at a middle school in town, and he's been an educator for 27 years. He said kids are not going to be irreparably harmed because they don't do formal school
That's right.
for the next 6 weeks. They're not.
That's right.
But are they going to come out of this closer to their family or more separated from their family? And how we manage those relationships are more important than how long they're spending online on trying to figure out this school thing. So I know that's one of the things we want to talk about is that relationship piece. But in the midst of that crisis, depending on the level of crisis in your home, kind of depends on how the answers change, right? We, if we're a family, like Doug and I, again, we're talking yesterday and said, our families, not that we don't have any stress, but Doug and I, and Doug's wife, Misty, and my husband, Scott, we have some well-developed conflict resolution skills, and we have some good relationship foundations with our kids. And so if you're a family who has those things, now's the time that you can draw on that and make that stronger and better. And so I know Doug was talking about yesterday, one of the being intentional. So I'll let Doug start with that, talking about being intentional.
I'm just enjoying listening to you talk, Deborah. So
I can go forever.
I'm taking mental notes and will employ that to my family. Yeah, I think the big point about being intentional is that terminology, and everybody says that. I realize everybody says, "Oh yeah, you got to be intentional," but the reality is you really do have to be intentional. I mentioned earlier that it's just as difficult for your children to be at home around you all day long as it is for you to be around your children all day long. Remember, if you send your kids to public school or to private school, but they go to school outside of your home in some way, they're not used to being around you all day, right? So this idea that it's really tough on parents, but kids have an easy street is not the case. The children and the kids, whether they're fourth grade or sixth grade, or in my case, a sophomore in high school and a senior in high school, they're adapting as much as the parents are adapting having them home. They're adapting to have to be home. And so life is different, which means I have to take a lot more breaks during the day. I just can't sit down for 6 hours and plow through to get my tasks accomplished. I have to take breaks because they're in need of breaks. If you think about how a public school system or a private school system works, they go to class for 50 minutes and then they have a 3 to 5 minute break where they're roaming the halls, seeing their friends, going to the next class, sitting in class, interacting with their friends around them. And then it's another 5 to 7 minutes before the class actually starts. So you're talking a 40 to 45 minute instructional time from a teacher in a classroom. Everything else is relational. And so they're invested in relationships all day long. And they come home and there are no relationships to be had, right? So the stress that they're feeling, except for
except you and mom, that's it.
And they may not want to have that kind of relationship during the day, right? But the intentionality is to say, just because they're home, mom and dad, doesn't mean that it's my job to say, hey, this is a great time for our house to get clean, right? Having them do chores is not the relationship building. When we talk about intentional relationships, it means I have to get up. So let me give you an example. One of the things that we do now that I just have never done in my life, but at noon every day, I have a little timer on my computer screen that goes off. I drop what I'm doing. I close down, turn my screens off. I get up from my desk, and everybody, wherever they are and whatever they're doing, goes to our kitchen. We make lunch together. We sit down and eat lunch together, and we play 2 hands of Uno, right? As time together. And so, but we have to be very intentional about that. Or if it's spending time with our kids, right? So if I'm going on an errand, hey, do you want to go with me? Do you want to take a break from school and go with me? If I'm going to run to the grocery store, if I'm going to run to the post office, if I'm going to do like Deborah's doing, go see someone because they've lost their job and they're having a hard time, I just need to go see them and say hi to them, make sure they're doing okay. Kids, you want to be part of this and go with me. Just put your schoolwork down. It's not going to go anywhere. You can log back on tonight after dinner. if you really need to do that. Don't feel like you have to do it now. But including them in the everyday normalcy of life is a big deal, because if you're not used to that, it will feel awkward, right? And you need to give yourself grace for it to be awkward. But after a few days, when that awkward reality passes, believe it or not, your teenager will look forward to those times, right? Because you're making an intentional effort to go spend time with them. And as awkward as it feels to you, it feels to them. But that awkward stage will pass, and it's going to be refreshing for both of you. And that's where the intentional relationships happen. I would say this: if you're not used to doing that kind of thing, put it in your schedule. If you're we're in this crisis schooling, like Deborah said, stick it in your schedule. Make sure that if there's a certain time during the week, and you guys can figure that out based on your personal schedules, but there's a certain time during the week where you and they are just going to hang out. And I would say go as far as give them the control of that time once a week, and say, look, for this hour, it's our time. What do you want to do?
It's so important to give kids, a lot of times parents want to build relationship in a way that fits for us.
Yeah.
So if I like throwing the football in the backyard, that's the only thing I want to do is throw the football in the backyard with my son. But if what he likes is playing this overcooked game that my family has found during this crisis schooling time, in case you're wondering, PlayStation, it's called Overcooked. My family's in love with this game. My husband and my kids will play this game, and it's a cooperative game, and you're working together and you're problem solving how to get these meals out in time. And so I'm listening to my family, and they're arguing and getting frustrated with each other and problem solving and fixing it, and then laughing, and then frustrated, and then laughing some more, right? Their conversations go like this. Wait, no, do the rice first. You can't do the rice. I have to make the sauce first. Did you leave that in there too long? Don't leave it in there too long. Okay, no, I have to take the plate first. If you don't let me take the plate first, I can't put the rice. I don't even know what they're talking about. I don't know. These little cartoons on the screen are moving around, and they're in love with this game, right? So, but allowing your kids to take that time to say, will you play Overcooked with me, right? And
That's
luckily
right.
my husband does that, so I don't have to. And I'm like, so there's a little tag team going on.
A little honesty is good for the soul.
Right. And then my 20-year-old loves, she's still at home. She loves going through Facebook and what is it? Twitter, Instagram. What does she have? Instagram. She goes through these memes and stuff, and she'll just sit and laugh. And so she loves to sit on the couch and laugh about them. And we laugh about what it reminds us about and who it reminds us of. And then we laugh some more. She loves that. And so taking the time to do that. So meeting them on their terms is an important move towards relationship. Allowing them to choose what we're going to do and what we're going to spend time doing. Is it playing the game? Is it playing catch with the football? Is it doing the Twitter thing? Is it, what is it? And not that you can't have some other times where you say, hey, you know what? I really want us to spend time reading this book together. I want to play 2 hands of Uno. So you can still have some control over doing those things as well. But it's so important to let them choose the way
because I think what that tells them is it's not that you want to do X with me, Mom. It's that you want to spend time with me. And so whether you say that directly to your children or not, I don't think is the issue. It's that you're available for them, so that being intentional, you're being available, and they can choose. And the fact that we can't roll our eyes and take a deep cleansing breath, because you're not going to enjoy it, quote unquote. But you do it joyfully, right? It's not the activity, it's the relational time that you get with your children. And that's the important part of being intentional about it.
I think some of the things that we can do during this time is reminiscing about fun memories that we have. Thinking about doing this session today, I started asking my kids, what's a fun family memory that you have? Just tell me your first one. So my 16-year-old said, when I went miniature golfing with Dad, I think he was like 9 when he did that. That was his first memory. Like, maybe they need to go miniature golfing again. my 13-year-old daughter said, oh shoot, I just forgot what she said, but it was a memory she had about camping, I think, one time when we went camping. And so it's interesting to hear just reminiscing about the memories, what was fun about that. And even if you just spend a few minutes, it can just be a random remembering a fun thing, a fun time, because reviewing those memories is a good way to draw closer to relationship. But then use this as a time to make those memories. I think you get some good insight when you hear what kinds of things they remember. What's the first thing they remember? Gives you some good insights. Oh, maybe we should do that again, or maybe we should do something like that again.
Yeah, and for me, it'd be like, I don't even remember that. Right? So they're going to say stuff that as parents, we're like, what did we do again? Walk that through, what happened, to try and jog my own memory, because I don't even remember that happening. But that's a good point that Deborah said, is maybe that's something, if that's what stands out, focus on those things to re-engage, creating new memories around the same stuff, because they obviously enjoyed that reality, right? So
I actually thought, when Brendan was saying that, I thought, I wonder if we could set up our own goofy golf thing in the backyard.
Right,
And
why not?
I don't even have a golf club, but I was like, I don't know, we'll use a fly swatter or something. I don't know.
Yeah, for us it was croquet, right? We had a croquet set
Oh,
in
yeah.
our backyard. I can't do that now because now it's all quarter minus and granite. But at the time it was croquet, and so those kind of things. Okay, what else can we do, right? So you have to put some effort in. I think as parents that we want it to be willy-nilly, and sometimes it's just going to take some effort, probably because we're not used to doing it. And you need to that needs to be okay. Acknowledging the reality that you're just not used to doing this right now, and you have to re-engage that part of being a parent.
The other part that I think, besides just activities and time, because there is no substitute for time. There's not a substitute for spending time with your kids. Don't ever let somebody tell you there's a substitute. There's not.
Yeah.
That's
so a great phrase, by the way.
Important.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Deborah, but I was trying to remember that phrase this morning. That's a great way of putting that. That there's no substitute for time. And so it seems simple, but it's hard to get the wording down for me. I got to keep saying it over to commit it to memory, but it's a great point.
Well, the other piece is that in that time, I think a big general concept that parents can focus on is affirming their children, and not affirming what they do, but who they are.
Yeah.
And finding reasons to affirm them. So if my son goes and takes out the trash, I don't tell him, oh, thank you for taking out the trash. You did a great job taking out the trash. I affirm the quality. I really appreciate how responsible you were taking out that trash. I appreciate the initiative you took to do that without being asked. I appreciate your thoughtfulness. Whatever the thing is that you appreciate about that moment, was it their thoughtfulness? Was it their responsibility? Was it their intentionality? Was it their forethought that they put into something? Was it whatever the situation is? I appreciate, that's one of the things I appreciate about you is your kindness. You're very kind to your brother or your sister or your mom or your dad or your, if they bring up something about a friend and they're worried about them and you spend some time, the other piece is don't be afraid of expressing empathy for your kids. If they're upset, just be okay sitting in that with them for a little bit. If they're stressed about school, sit in that with them for a bit. Don't correct it. Don't problem solve it. This is really hard doing school this way. I understand that. This is very different. This has to be hard. Let them sit there with them for a time, and then use some wisdom, some judgment when it might be time to help problem solve or find a new way out or help it not feel so overwhelming. But don't be afraid of that empathy piece. So for example, they bring up a friend and you sit in kind of that space with them that they're worried about a friend or they're worried about grandma or grandpa, or that this is a big thing. Yeah. We have to be careful with grandma and grandpa. I understand why you would be worried about that. I'm a little worried about that too, if you are. Sit there. So don't be afraid of that empathy, but then affirm, and at a time that's appropriate, you can affirm that thoughtfulness and that kindness. You know, one of the things I love about you is that you were thinking about grandma and grandpa today. That's a quality I love about you. And then let it go. It can be short and simple like that. But taking that time to affirm your kids is a huge relationship strengthener. And so finding those times is very important.
And I think it's really important to what you said, Deborah, and it's not just affirming the action. Because if all we affirm is the action, then all you're telling them is what they do matters most, right? You're not saying those words, but that's what you're modeling over the years. And so, but by affirming the character and by affirming them as a person, you're building them. And not just their activity or not just what they can accomplish, but you're as a person, as a human being, right? And you're affirming those good qualities and those good things that we want to instill in all of our kids. And so like everybody else, the more you get praise for the quality, the more engaged that quality becomes in our everyday life.
And I think for families that maybe don't have already some good conflict resolution skills and maybe don't have a really good foundation, and maybe there's just a lot of struggle happening in the relationship. In the biblical parenting coaching that I was trained in and that we talk a lot about how relationships can only handle, it's like proportional. The amount of firmness they can handle is directly proportional to the amount of relationship that you have. So if you don't have a good relationship, that relationship's not going to handle very much firmness from parents. But firmness is an important part of parenting, but it can't happen absent of relationship. So if you're in a family that goes even beyond firmness to harshness, I think of a word picture of Beauty and the Beast. I was watching this with my kids the other day, and it just gave me this. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is families right now. When Belle and the Beast are trying to sort of figure out having a relationship because she's promised to stay there, and there's this dinner, and it's this really awkward situation where you're like, oh my gosh, he's working so hard to figure out a way to be nice, and she's trying to figure out, do I trust him? Do I not? She has no trust in him. Then he finally leaves, says, you can go wherever, just don't go in this wing. She ends up going in that wing. He catches her, and he reacts with this intense, harsh anger, blow up. She's like, I'm done. I run away. She's like, I don't care. I don't even care what the promise is. I'm out of here. And she just runs off. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is families right now. This is families who have no foundation of relationship, no trust, no communication skills, no understanding where each other's coming from. So a kid does something, shows up where they're not supposed to show up, interrupts a meeting they're not supposed to interrupt, whatever it is that they do. And so the dad or the other sibling or the mom blows up with anger, or the kid's in the middle of doing something and the parent walks in and the kid is the beast who reacts with this anger and doesn't have the reaction. Or we're a family of all beasts and we're all reacting with harshness. Our relationships can't we have to learn to pull it back to the level of firmness, not harshness, but that's a different video. But we have to build the relationship. And so starting with that affirmation piece is a super powerful place to start. Your kids have some great qualities. There's good things about them. And as a parent, when you spend time thinking, what are great qualities about my kid? Can they stay focused on a task for a very long time? Can they play video games for 7 hours at a time? They can stay focused. If what I can affirm is, I really appreciate your ability to stay on task. Like, I'm watching you play that video game and you are focused and thinking through that video game. I'm impressed by your ability to pay attention, and then let it go and walk away. Don't throw a nasty tagline like, I wish you would focus on something else. Don't. Just affirm, if that's what you can start with, that's what they can do. If they're great readers and they want to get lost in books all the time, can I tell you, as a mom who has one great reader and 3 people who refuse to read, like, it is like pulling teeth to make them read. I super appreciate so much more how much my kid used to get lost in books when I'd be like, put the book down already. I'm like, oh, okay. I appreciate that about him, that he can get lost in a book. So, anyway, so just even if you're one of those families struggling so hard to start building a foundation, spend time on their terms. What do they like to do? figure out playing that video game. Honestly, if I was having some tension with my kids, I'd figure out how to play that Overcooked game.
Yeah.
We have some good foundations, and so I can build a relationship with my kids in some different areas, and I can let my husband play the video game that I don't want to play. But I would be willing to play that if that is what I needed to open a door with my kids.
And I would say this: if you are in a position like Deborah was stating, that you don't have that basis where you can talk into their life like that and then receive it immediately, because if that's not the case, and you say to them, I so am impressed and appreciate how you can focus on that game for so long, and they will have this weird look on their face and they blow you off seemingly. Don't be discouraged with that, because that's still soaking in, right? They may roll their eyes and say, yeah, whatever, put their earbuds back in and keep going, but that will settle into them. And if that continues to happen, like everything else, it's the long-term soaking that needs to take place. And that's okay. Let that be. But don't let that be discouraging to you, that they didn't jump up and say, oh, thank you so much for saying that, and come over and give you a big hug. That's not going to happen, right?
Right.
And if it did, you're going to start questioning yourself. Where's my child, and what did you do with him? Right? So you need to be okay with that and let that be, because it's still settling in them. And inside, you'll turn your back and walk away, and a smirk and a smile will come across their face because it feels good for them. They just won't let you know that.
If there was a memory during this COVID time that resonated with you, please share it.
We gave our 15-year-old, do you know what you're doing for school? Yeah. Are you all set? Yeah. Go get it done. Well, you turn on the computer, it is overwhelming, right? And so one of the things that I learned is, yes, he's 15. Yes, he understands apps on his phone. Yes, he can get to TikTok and Snapchat faster than I even know what the apps are. And I have to ask, what is this app? What does it do? Do I need to block it? So I don't even know what that is. But that doesn't mean they understand how to do online school, and how to get into Google Classroom, and how to interact with the assignments they're giving. They may not know that information. And so for me, very practically, for my sophomore in high school, every day we sit down and we print out what he has to get accomplished today in his classes. Don't worry about everything else. Worry about what you have. And we write down the assignments for all the classes, do this and check it off as you go. Otherwise, he gets completely overwhelmed. And so just because they're junior high or they're sophomores in high school, don't assume that they're perfectly comfortable doing online crisis schooling, because they're not. You might have to get a little bit of hands-on, set them down, work it out, put a system in place so they can take a deep breath and realize, okay, I can do this too. It gives them self-confidence and gives them the ability to work through that stuff. I would say this: if you're a parent and you are like me, I mean, I can't pull my hair out, it's already out, but if you're pulling your hair out and you're on the edge of, this is not normal for me, you're right, it's not. It's not normal for you, and it's not normal for your student or your child. My encouragement to you would be to understand and accept the reality this is not the normalcy, which means you can't act like it's normal. To be intentional about setting breaks in your schedule. You can do it. Everybody can do it. Set a break in your schedule. Get up, walk in there, put your hand on their shoulder, ask them how they're doing, go refill your coffee, and come back to your desk throughout the day. Do little things that add up to big relational moments, because when they're really stressed out because you've done those little things, they will come to you and they'll ask you those questions.
Like, we're crisis schooling. We're doing life in crisis right now.
Yeah.
And every family's at different layers. And remembering that it is okay to give yourself permission to put the school piece aside if what we need to do is rally together and get through this time together.
Yeah.
Way more important than whatever the school piece is.